We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Amud Aleph and Meseches Shevuos. This is Shevuos Daf 30a. This is the beginning of the fourth parak of Meseches Shevuos. This Amud is sponsored by Alexander Rosenfeld in memory of Shmuel Zev Rosenfeld. Thank you for your sponsorship. If you would like to sponsor an Amud or a Daf, see the description box below, and see the description box below to see how you can support this channel. The parak begins with the Mishnah Shevuos HaEdus. When it comes to Shevuos HaEdus, again, Shevuos HaEdus is a situation where a person swears that he does not know testimony in a particular case. It turns out that he is not telling the truth, so he brings a carbon olav yored, as we will see. In any case, the Mishnah says that Shevuos HaEdus applies specifically by situations where the person could have testified. As the Mishnah now continues, no heges ba'anoshim v'lo b'noshim. Shevuos HaEdus applies to men and not to women. Barachokin v'lo b'krovin, it applies to non-relatives, but it does not apply to relatives. B'ksherin v'lo b'psulin, it applies to those who are able to testify, not those who are disqualified from testifying. Ve'ena no heges ela b'ru'uyin lohoid, it only applies to those who are fit to testify. B'fnei bezdin v'shalo b'fnei bezdin mipiatzmo, if it's in front of the court or not in front of the court, if the person takes the Shavuot on its own, then Shevuos HaEdus applies. U'mipi acherim, but let's say the oath is administered by others, ein chayavin ad sheyichbru behen bebezdin, then they're not liable until they actually deny that they know testimony in the court. Divrei Rabbi Meir, these are the words of Rabbi Meir, that's Rabbi Meir's opinion. The Chachamim omer, and the Chachamim say, bein mipiatzmo uvein mipi acherim, it doesn't matter if the person takes the oath on his own or if it's administered by others. Einon chayavin ad sheyichbru behen bebezdin, they are not liable until they deny it in the court. And the Mishnah continues, v'chayavin al zadon hashvua, the person is liable in a situation where he understands the fact that he's violating the oath. V'al shegagasa im zadon ha'edus, also the person is liable, let's say he does it in a mistaken fashion, but it's on purpose in terms of the testimony. We'll see Rashi in a moment. V'einon chayavin al shegagasa, and the person is not chayiv if it's a total shogeg. Umahin chayavin al zadon, and what are they chayiv al zadon? Some have the girsa al zadon hashvua, some don't. What are they chayiv when it's done on purpose? Carbon olav yored, the person is chayiv a carbon olav yored. This is unique that by Shevuos HaEdus the person brings a carbon even in a situation, or rather specifically in a situation where it's done b'mezid. And Rashi explains, Shevuos HaEdus noheges ba'anoshim v'lo ba'anoshim, when it comes to Shevuos HaEdus that applies by men and not by women, because it's written v'hu aid, it says he's a witness, b'roi lohoid diber hakasiv, we're talking about people that are able to testify. V'isha psula le'edus, and a woman is disqualified from testifying, k'diyalef v'pirkan mi v'amdu shnei ha'anoshim, like we learn out in our parak from the pasuk shnei ha'anoshim, that's why it doesn't apply to women. Krovim, relatives, psulim le'edus, they're also disqualified from testifying, v'lo b'psulin, and it doesn't apply to those who are disqualified. Kimo gazlan, an example of that would be a gazlan, shu pasal min haTorah, somebody who steals is pasal to be a witness min haTorah. Ela beru'uyin lohayd, it only applies to those who are able to testify. The Gemara mefarish l'mu'utei mai, the Gemara will explain what that's coming to exclude. B'fnei bezin v'shalo b'fnei bezin, again it said in front of the court and not in front of the court. Im mipi atzmo nishba, meaning if the person takes the Shavuot on his own, this is within Rabbi Meir, sh'amar Shavuot she'eni yodei l'cha'edus, he says a Shavuot, I'm taking an oath that I don't know any testimony, that will apply whether in front or not in front of the court. Umipi acherim, now if it's administered by others, Rashi explains that case, kegon mashbia ani alechem shetavo v'ti'iduni, the person says, I am administering an oath to you that you should come and you should testify for me. V'yamru lo ein anu yodim l'chedus, they say to him, we don't know testimony. And Rashi continues, v'lo hotziu shvua mipiyam, they don't actually say a shvua from their mouths. Einan chayavim, in that case, they're not liable at sheyichbru bo bebezin, until they actually deny it in court. T'chsiv, as it's written in lo yagid b'mokom she'ilu hayamagid hayamol, we're talking in a place where had they testified, it would have been effective. Ukra b'mushba mipi acherim ksiv, and the pasuk is written by those who administered the oath by others. Aval mipi atzmo, yolef Rabbi Meir b'gzeir shaveh, but let's say the person takes the oath on his own, so for that, Rabbi Meir learns out from Gzeir Shaveh, Kidem Mefarish B'Gemara v'afilu chutz leBezdin. He learns out, as the Gemara will explain, that it applies even outside of Bezdin. Chayavin, they are liable, carbon olav yored. Again, the liability by Shevuos HaEdus is for carbon olav yored. And the first situation is al zadon hashvua. Let's say it's done on purpose. Sharei lo ne'emar bo v'nelam. It doesn't say the word v'nelam, that there was a lapse of awareness. And so the situation is what they did. They knew exactly what they were doing wrong, that they were lying about the fact, and that they were taking an oath and lying about the fact that they did not know no testimony. And it also applies v'al shigagasa im zadon ha'edus. It also could apply if there's a shogeg on the shvua, but it's on purpose in terms of the testimony. Shemizidim heim v'yodim lo edus. They're doing it on purpose. They know that they know testimony, and yet they're denying it. Aval shogegim heim al hakarbon. However, they're shogeg in terms of the fact that there's a liability to the carbon. That there's a lapse of awareness with regards to. Keshar shigagas bitoy l'sha'avar, like cases where a person makes a mistake in terms of saying an oath in the past. To kimna ba'omer yodei ani sheshvu azu asur. We said that could be in a case where the person says, I know the shvu is forbidden, aval eni yodei shechayav an ala carbon, but I don't know that there's a liability to a carbon. V'ein chayav an al shigagasu, but they are not chayav to bring the carbon if it's a total shogeg. Im shogegim heim legamri. Let's say they're completely shogeg. Kisvuren she'ein yodin lo edus. They think they don't know testimony. V'achar gach nizkru, and then they remember. Sharei anusin hein. Rashi explains the reason, because that's considered already onus. Lo karina buhu nishboin la sheker. That's not called taking an oath. That is a lie. And the Gemara says, Minahani mili, from where do we know this? Rashi explains, Minahani mili denoshim psulos laedus. From where do we know that women are disqualified from testifying? And the Gemara says, Detan Rabbanan, because the rabbis taught, V'omdu shnehu anoshim. It says the two men get up. And the question over here in this pasuk is, are we talking about the litigants, or are we talking about the witnesses? And the Brisa says, Be'edim hakosim edaber. The pasuk here is talking about the witnesses. Ata omer be'edim, you're saying it's talking about the witnesses. Oeno ela bebale dinim. Maybe it's talking about the litigants. Kishu omer asher lohem hariv, when the pasuk says those who have the argument with one another, hare bale din and amr, that's the part of the pasuk that talks about the litigants. Hamani mekayim v'amdu shnehu anoshim. What does it mean when it says the two men, they stand? Be'edim hakosim medaber. It's talking about witnesses. It says men. That shows that the witnesses have to be men. V'yem navshach lomer. Now, if you have some reason to oppose this argument, so namar kan shnei v'namar lahalon shnei. It says over here that there are two, and it says over there that there are two, meaning when it talks about witnesses, it talks about al pi shnei edim, talks about two witnesses. Malahalan be'edim, just like over there, the context is edim. Afkan be'edim, so too over here, the context is edim. Ma'im nafshach lomer. Now, what does the Brisa mean, says the Gemara, what does the Brisa mean when it says that if you have some reason to oppose this argument? It means as follows. Midalo kasav va'asher lohem hariv. Maybe you're going to say from the fact that it doesn't say the word va'asher lohem hariv, it just says asher lohem hariv, so then maybe kulei krab b'balei dinin mishtoi. So maybe we're not talking about different individuals. If it would have said with a vav, so you could be talking about the witnesses in one part and then talking about the litigants in the other part. But if it says asher lohem hariv, it sounds like it's describing who we're discussing. Maybe the entire pasuk is talking about the litigants, and so that's why the Brisa brings another proof. Nemar kan shnei v'nemar lahalon shnei. It says two over here and two over there. Malahalon be'edim, just like over there, it's in the context of witnesses. Afkan be'edim, so too over here, it's the context of witnesses. We'll take a look at the full pasuk. The full pasuk is v'amdu shnehu anoshim asher lohem hariv. The two men who have the argument. That's what the Gemara means to say, that in the simple reading of the pasuk, asher lohem hariv, which is the litigants, is actually describing the shnehu anoshim, the two men, and so therefore you could argue that we're talking about the litigants the entire time. Again, the Brisa is trying to say, no, we're not talking about the litigants in the first part of the pasuk. We're actually talking over there about the witnesses. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Idach, we learned in another Brisa of Yamdu Shnehu Anoshim, the pasuk again, it says that the two men stand, Be'edim HaKosim Adaber. Again, this Brisa says as well that we're talking here about the Edim, we're talking about the witnesses. Atomer Be'edim Oeno Ela Bebale Dinim, you're saying it's the witnesses, maybe it's really talking about the litigants. Amrit, we can say the following argument. V'chishnayim Boim Ladin Shlosha Ein Boim Ladin, when it comes to litigants, is it specifically two and not three? You can have more than two litigants, and so therefore we can assume we're talking about the witnesses. Again, this Brisa says as well, Vim nafshach lomer, if you have anything to say against this argument, Nemar kan shnei v'nemar lahalon shnei, it says the word shnei over here, and it says the word shnei over there, ma lahalon be'edim, afkan be'edim, just like over there, it's in the context of witnesses, so too over here, it is by the witnesses. And the Gemara says again, Mayim nafshach lomer, what does this Brisa mean when it says that if you have any argument, any counter-argument, it means as follows, V'chitem, if you're going to say, B'toveya v'nitba kamishtoikra, we're talking about the person making the claim, and we're talking about the defendant, and so therefore there really are two parties, even though in each party there may be more than one person, but maybe that's why we're using the number two. So Nemar kan shnei v'nemar lahalon shnei, it says over here shnei, it says over there shnei, malahalon be'edim afkan be'edim, just like over there it's witnesses, so too over here it is witnesses. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Idach, we learned in another Brisa, v'yamdu shnehu anoshim, again it says that the two men stand, be'edim hakosim adaber, we're talking here about the witnesses. Ata omer be'edim oeno ela bebale dinim, you're saying we're talking about the witnesses, maybe we're really talking about the litigants. litigants. Amrit, we can make the following argument. Do you think that men come to court in terms of being litigants and women don't come to court? Women also can be litigants in a case. And so therefore, when it says men, it must be talking about the witnesses over here. And again, this brisa says, now if you're going to make any counter arguments, Nemar kan shnei v'nemar lahalan shnei. It says over here the word shnei. It says over there the word shnei. Malahalan be'edim afkan be'edim. Just like over there we're talking about witnesses, so too over here we're talking about witnesses. Again, the Gemara asks, Mayim nafshach lomer. What does it mean that you might have a counter argument? Maybe as follows. V'chitema. Maybe you'll say, Isha lav orcha. Maybe you'll say it's true that a woman could be a litigant, but it's not in a normal situation that a woman would be a litigant. Mishum, because the pasuk says, Kol kavuda bas melech penima, that the bas melech, the proper honor is to be inside, and so therefore the idea is she would not be out in a court case. And so you might argue that's why it says men, and it's really talking about the litigants. Nemar kan shnei v'nemar lahalan shnei. But again, it says in the pasuk shnei, and it says later, it says further on shnei ma lahalan be'edim afkan be'edim. Just like over there we're talking about witnesses, so too over here we're talking about witnesses. And the Gemara continues. Taner Rabban, the rabbis taught, v'yamdu shnei ha'anoshim. It says that the two men stand. Mitzvah l'balei dinin sheyamdu. That part of the pasuk is saying that there's a mitzvah for the litigants that they should be standing. Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, Shamati, I heard, Shimratzu lahoshev es shneihem moshiv, that if the judges want to tell them to sit down, they can have them sit down. And the brisa continues, Eizeu Asr, what would be forbidden? Shelo yeh echad omed ve'echad yoshev. You shouldn't have one stand and one sit. Echad medaber kol tzarchu v'echad katzer devarecha. One of them gets to speak the full amount that he needs to speak, and the other one we tell him to shorten, to be brief. That is not allowed. And the Gemara continues, Taner Rabban, and the rabbis taught, but tzedek tishbot Mesechet, it says you have to judge in a righteous fashion, and that means shelo yeh echad yoshev ve'echad omed. You can't have one sitting and one standing in terms of the litigants. Again, echad medaber kol tzarchu. One has all the time he needs to speak to make his claim. V'yachad omer lo katzer devrech. And one, we say to him that you have to shorten your words, you have less time to speak. That is not allowed. Davar acher, another explanation. B'tzedek tishbot hamisecha. What does it mean? B'tzedek tishbot hamisecha. It means have a donis chavercha lekav zchus. You have to judge your friend. You have to judge him for merit. Let's say you have a situation where you're not sure whether he did an avera or not. You have to judge him in a favorable manner. And the Gemara continues. Tani Rav Yosef taught, b'tzedek tishbot hamisecha. You have to judge favorably, and he darshans it to mean im she'itcha b'torah of mitzvos, the one who is with you in Torah and mitzvos. That's the idea of amisecha. Hishtadel ladona yafa. You have to try to judge in a good fashion. Rashi explains what this means. Hishtadel ladona yafa means l'kamon mefarish lo. This will be explained later on. L'mishrei b'tigrei imbo shnei dinim lefanecha. The case over here would be, let's say you have a situation where two different court cases come before you. V'echad mehem shel talmidei chachamim. One of them involves talmidei chachamim. That's what it means. Im she'itcha b'torah of a mitzvahs. Have a posiko, so tchila, you should take that case first. Upatra samil fanecha. Again, you take that case first and then take the other case. That's what the Gemara means to say over here. And the Gemara continues, Rav Ula bereid Rav Eloi havale dina kamed Rav Nachman. Rav Ula, the son of Rav Eloi, he had a case in front of Rav Nachman. Shalach le Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef sent him Ula chavirenu amis b'torah v'mitzvahs. Rav Yosef sent to Rav Nachman that you should know Ula, our friend, he is together with us in Torah and mitzvahs. Amar, he said, Lamai shalachli, why did he send me this message about the litigant to say that this is a person who is with us in Torah and mitzvahs? L'chanufele, is it in order that I should show some kind of favoritism to him? That doesn't make any sense. So Hadar Amar, then he said, L'mishra b'tigrei, what it means is, as Rashi just explained, it means that I should take his case first before other cases. Again, that's what it means, Hishtadel laduno yafa, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Amud Beis.